My name is Mal Sayan, and I am conducting an interview here with Dr. Frank Veith. Dr. Veith needs no introduction to any vascular surgeon around the world. And Dr. Veith has recently written and published The Medical Jungle, which I have an unautographed copy of here. Dr. Veith will rectify that soon, hopefully for me. Dr. Veith has chronicled some interesting portions of his career, and early, middle, and late. And we're going to do a brief interview and try to cover some of the aspects of the book that I found really, really fascinating. So, Dr. V, thank you for joining me here today.
Yeah, Mal, it's nice to be with you.
Dr. V, in your book early on, you describe yourself as extremely shy as a student and early trainee. How do you account for your evolution in your personality?
You know, Mal, it's a great question. I don't know how to answer it. I still consider myself pretty shy. I don't jump up and ask questions at meetings and stuff like that. I guess in my position, I had to be a little more forceful and outgoing, and with practice, you get better at public speaking. But I always get nervous when I would give a talk, particularly at a big meeting like the American Surgical or even the SVS.
Can you describe how you got interested in transplant surgery, and then as a profession, did we drop the boat on transplant? Should we have more incorporated transplant surgery into vascular surgery?
Well, it was very simple. I trained at the Peter at Brigham with Franny Moore and Joe Murray, who were really pioneers in kidney transplantation and to some extent in liver transplantation. And when I started out as a career, the one area in heart transplants had been done by others, Norm Shumway, Dick Lauer, who was a classmate of mine. And when I started out, of course, I did kidney transplants because I knew how to do them from my training. But I also wanted to be in an area that was somewhat unconquered. And that got me into lung transplantation, which really had not been done with any degree of success.
You really took to limb salvage as one of your early things, is differentiating yourself from the other hospitals. And that was very interesting to me. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, again, it was, of course, when I went to Montefiore, which was really in New York City, a somewhat second-rate institution in the Bronx. It was not glamorous like Cornell, Columbia, Mount Sinai, NYU. I wanted to do the normal stuff, aneurysms, carotids, etc. And we didn't have many of those cases for a variety of reasons. And so we did have an abundance of poor patients with threatened limbs, with gangrene or ulceration, who were faced with amputation. And the thinking of the day was, well, if they have such a limb-threatening lesion, they need a below-knee amputation and, quote, rapid rehabilitation. Well, we found that didn't work, so we started with great care and concern, obviously, to challenge the thinking of the day, which was not to do reconstructive vascular surgery for limb salvage.
You were one of the early advocates, maybe the first, for Evar for ruptured aneurysms.
Well, we actually did the first Evar outside of Argentina. That was a stroke of good fortune. As I said, I always had been interested in endovascular techniques because I'd become very friendly with Barry Katzen, who was a well-known interventional radiologist. And because of our friendship and my early support for him, he used to invite me to his interventional meetings and ISIT meetings in Miami. And I'd go there and I'd hear what these interventional radiologists were doing. So I was exposed to the benefits of those endovascular techniques, and I was a very early believer, despite many of my colleagues not being believers in angioplasty, stenting, and so forth. And I was always interested in the idea, which I heard at one of Katzen's meeting, actually presented by Julio Palmes, really Parodi's work, of doing Evar, because we had a lot of very sick aneurysm patients who didn't do well with an open aneurysm repair. So when that became available, we embraced it. I had a relationship, or developed a relationship, with Juan Parodi, who wanted to come to our meeting in New York, and we invited him. And after a lot of backing and filling and overcoming a lot of difficulties with J&J and the company who made the Palmes stents, and with the FDA and so forth, we managed to do the first Evar in North America and the U.S. with Parodi and his colleague Claudio Schoenholz. And remarkably, because we were very lucky, that procedure proved to be a big success.
So you mentioned Barry Katzen, and you've been an early proponent of collaboration with interventional radiology. And during your SBS presidential address, that was one of your 3 missions for our specialty, was collaboration. And you say later that we failed, that we didn't quite achieve collaboration uniformly with cardiology. And why do you think that happened that way?
Well, human nature. And again, the book highlights a lot of the frailties or bad traits of human nature, which you don't think are going to apply in medicine. I mean, lust for power, control, self-interest, greed, and sometimes jealousy. And those traits, which you'd like to think aren't very popular in medicine, because we're supposedly a humanistic specialty or occupation, those traits are just as common, maybe even more common in medicine and surgery and in hospitals, other institutions, medical schools, as they are in other walks of life. And that really is the theme of the book. And you have to, for young people particularly, have to be aware that human nature is not always benign. And in fact, it can be very malignant. And you have to deal with that and be persistent and recognize that you can sometimes, not always, overcome it and keep it what you're doing. And that certainly applied to limb salvage and lung transplantation, and absolutely applied to endovascular.
One of your other goals for the specialty at your presidential address, and one that I think you have falsely characterized as failing, was independence. And I think that what I hear from you is I don't think you understand how much you won and how different things are than when you started. And it's difficult, again, I think, for people of a certain generation to know how subservient we were to general surgery. And especially in the 70s and 80s and 90s, when we were basically, not even a subspecialty of general surgery at times. They were just basically
we
general
weren't even
surgeons
that.
doing
You're
it.
correct.
But now it's accepted. I actually had an abstract that I submitted to the VAM showing that vascular surgeons have better outcomes than general surgeons in open aortic surgery. And it was rejected because they felt it was too obvious. So it's
not
come,
obvious.
well, it's come full circle that, it's just accepted now that vascular surgeons do this better.
You should resubmit it and get it accepted, because that was the nature of our application to the ABMS to become an independent specialty. And yeah, we did make some inroads. I mean, we got residencies that were 0 and 5, vascular surgery residencies. But the problem now is in many institutions, and I've been in 2 of them, or maybe 3, actually, because you can include the Cleveland Clinic. Vascular surgery doesn't, because it's not a separate specialty, it doesn't have a seat at the table where resources are doled out. You have to go through your general surgery chairman or your cardiac surgery chairman, as it turns out at the Cleveland Clinic, in order to get a sign-off on what you want to do. And we really are a separate specialty. We're certainly as separate as neurosurgery or orthopedic surgery or gynecology. And yet that barrier has not yet been breached. I'm not fighting it anymore, but I think sooner or later we have to come in accordance with other countries, and vascular surgery should be a totally separate specialty. Why? Because we sort of are.
Finally, the last section of the book is on mentorship, and you have really some friends of mine who've written summaries. I think I'm probably one of the last American vascular surgeons who you did not train, but everybody else you did train, and so there's a lot of nice passages in there. So, what do you think? And your two granddaughters, at least so far that I know of, have going into vascular surgery as well.
They're coming.
Yeah, yeah. And that's wonderful. You know, I'm just trying to get my kids to graduate high school. So I think that you've done a great job of mentoring.
Again, it's luck. It really.
Yeah, well, it's not all luck, Dr. Veith, because there's a lot of people out there who have luck and just don't have this this kind of tree, this hierarchical tree of people that they've trained and have gone on to be successful. As I train my residents, I want them to go on and do what I do. You know, I try to model this as something worth doing, as teaching is, but a lot of times they go for the money and they go, into private practice. But what do you do? What do you think the key is to to mentoring them? And it's more than luck, because I know you've done a great job with it.
Really, some of it's luck, because I always picked people that wanted to go into academics, and then I would beat them unmercifully to publish stuff. And they used to joke about it and belittle me for it. But the other thing is to treat people at all levels, which you do, obviously. I know this from actual, people that have worked with you, is to treat people well and as equals. In other words, the old Geheimrat plan, where the boss, the chairman or the chief, took all the good cases and all the money and was first author on all the papers, that's a remedy for failure. You've got to pay people well, so you split the income pretty much as bad as it can be in vascular surgery sometimes. You split the good cases, and you put them as first author on papers, even though you may end up writing the paper, or largely writing in it may be your idea, and they sort of get the bug. I mean, Keith Calagero is a perfect example. And we have lots of papers together on some of the techniques that I fell into because I had a lot of failures before that on treating infected prosthetic grafts. I've never had a first name paper on that subject. And Keith and Russell Sampson have the papers, and they did a lot of the work, of course, and got smitten by it. And when that was presented at the American Surgical, Keith presented it. A lot of people still don't believe it, but that's okay.
Your legacy in mentorship speaks for itself. And, when I run into people like Keith or Russell or
the other thing,
Albarama,
it's sort of funny, but alive, just looking at my list of trainees, a lot of them were not Americans. They were either from a foreign country. Some of them were black. Some of them were women, when it was unstylish to have women and foreign medical graduates and so forth. I mean, look at Ali Abarama. I mean, he's the paragon of success in vascular. He wasn't one of my trainees, by the way, but he was somebody who came from a foreign country and reached the pinnacle of success in vascular surgery. So it's the person, not their background, skin color, gender, whatever. It's the person, and that you pick people, and some of them are good and some of them turn out not so good.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a skill in picking that. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Veith. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Mal. Thanks for talking about this in the book. Okay.
And I really just kind of scratched the surface again. Medical jungle. I highly recommend it. It's a lot of entertaining anecdotes, some of which I've heard through the grapevine before, but to see them written down, and it's you don't really pull many punches in the book, so
Oh, I
it's a
pulled a lot of
very.
punches.
I saw you pull a few, but we didn't name a lot of names, but the few people got named, and it's very, very fascinating to see. The evolution of our specialty through your eyes and through your vision forward as well. So I really appreciate all you've done for the specialty and for joining us today. So thank you so much.
Well, Mal, thank you for doing this. This is great. Really appreciate it.